Hello, this is John Filbert, and this week we are talking, or this module, we're talking about the prevalence of sexual violence. And if you go to the website for the course, you'll see a PowerPoint presentation. This is what the first slide looks like, the prevalence of sexual violence, a summary by John Filbert. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. And if I were you, and I'm not, and you don't have to do this, what I would do is I would just take this screen and put me up into the corner of your screen and then follow along the PowerPoint as I go through the basic topics. There often is a question about how often sexual violence happens on college campuses. The most reliable piece of data that we have is that 5% of college women each year experience either rape or attempted rape. And that is something that has been shown in several different studies using several different methods by several different groups of researchers or organizations, and I find it to be the most reliable statistic out there. So 1 in 20 each year. Now we can't add that up and say, well, if it's like there are some people who will say, well, if it's 5% a year, average woman's in college 4 to 5 years, then 20 to 25% of college women experience rape or attempted rape in college. That is making an extrapolation of the data that's not responsible. I would encourage you to look at the data for what it is and not for what it isn't. There's a newer study out there of how frequently sexual assault happens and on college campuses, and it was done on 9 different college campuses, which does a nice job of making the study much more generalizable than if it occurred on one campus. So the definitions that they used, they had 2 different things that they were measuring, and they operationally defined one as rape, and actually several different behaviors as rape, and then a broader range of behaviors as sexual assault. So if you take a look at the slide, sexual assault, they included forced sexual touching, oral, anal, and vaginal intercourse, and then finger or object penetration. Now, those things that I put in bold on that document, those are the ones, the subgroup of those activities that they labeled as rape. And so obviously the only thing that they didn't label as rape on that list was forced sexual touching. So you add that in, you have a more broad range of behaviors for sexual assault, rape being a much more specific set of usually penetrative acts. Now, this was all done in the 2014-2015 academic year, and for women, what they found was that 10% of college women experienced sexual assault in that academic year. It's pretty high. Now that's a number that's different from the 5% figure I gave you a minute ago, but it's a different range of behaviors. It's a broader range of behaviors. Now, what I put right below that on the slide is the range, and what that range is from the school that had the lowest rate of sexual assault and the school that had the highest rate of sexual assault. And that was the thing that interested me more than anything else in the whole study, was the tremendously large range. That you had one school where it was as low as 4%, one school that it was as high as 20%. Now, unfortunately, the authors of the study didn't share institutional characteristics about those places or what they were doing for prevention programming or whichever, and that would be really helpful to know. But the message I would get out of there is there is definitely something going on at some schools that makes it to be a worse environment for women than at others. Rape is a very similar story. 4% experienced rape, and the range there 2 to 8%, huge range. So that is something that they found. Now, for men experiencing sexual assault, and men do experience sexual assault and rape from time to time, less than women, but they do experience it. 3% of college men in that academic year had experienced sexual assault, and the range there was real broad, about 1.5% to 6%, roughly speaking, between different institutions. So that's pretty broad range. Rape was 0.8%, so less than 1%, but with a range of 0.3 to 1.4%. So obviously rape and sexual assault can happen to men at any age, any stage, just as it can with women, but it happens less to men, at least in the college years. With there are other statistics that I'll give you about sexual assault in college. 24%, roughly 1 in 4, have experienced rape or attempted rape at some point in their lifetime, and that's a Department of Justice study. It's not a study of how many rapes are reported or anything like that. It is an anonymous survey method that was used. That's where the 1 in 4 statistic comes from. And so it's actual real numbers during college. Have you experienced rape or attempted rape? And they ask many behaviorally specific questions. So they don't say, if you experience rape, check yes or no. It's not how they do it. They ask several different questions that define a certain kind of behavior, and then they code those into the different categories afterwards, the researchers do. So 24% college women, rape or attempted rape. And I'm sorry, I may have misspoken, in their lifetime. That's not during college. That's in their lifetime. So that's an important distinction. And then repeated there is the 5% statistic, women on college campuses every year. And then I include a statistic there about college men. And if you ask men if they've ever experienced rape, you actually get a pretty small percentage, roughly 3% in a lot of the different studies that have been done. However, if you add in child sexual abuse, have you experienced child sexual abuse? And it's carefully worded questions to uncover that. You get up to 16% of males who have experienced sexual abuse or other types of rape or sexual assault by the end of, or other types of rape by the age of 18. So if you've heard the 1 in 6 figure for men, that's where it comes from. And it's by the age of 18. Kind of the broad message to get out of this is if you have a case of a male survivor, usually it's when he was younger. Female survivors, usually the most dangerous years are between 15 and 24. For males, it tends to be at a younger age. But male on male rape, male on female rape, female on female rape, female on male rape, any time of life can happen to anyone. So, but we're just talking about in here with this data when it tends to happen most frequently. Now, as a way of making this real, not citing real numbers of any particular institution, but making the numbers seem a little bit more real, I did the math on if you have an average campus that has 19,000 undergraduate students, actually, sorry about that. What I did, this was actually for a particular institution that I visited not long ago. It's not an institution in Oklahoma. But this institution had 19,000 students and 11,685 were women. And I wanted them to understand how often rape might happen on their campus. With a 5% figure, that's about 584 women a year, about 2 a day, and 64 men as well. So this was actually a school out in California that I visited not too long ago. So you can do the math on this with about any institution if you know their undergraduate enrollment. The institution I visited had more women than men. That's where you get the numbers from on this particular slide. But even if you look up the number of women on a campus, number of men on a campus, and then do the math on that, you tend to get a number that's a lot higher than you might otherwise think. Certainly well beyond anything that's reported to the institution or reported by the institution in most cases. Now, often you'll get the question about how many men who commit rape on college campuses actually see any jail time. The answer to that is way less than 1%. You begin with an 11% figure of how many rapes on college campuses are reported to the police, and so already 89% are not reported to the police and certainly can then serve no jail time. Of that 11%, less than 10% result in any kind of criminal charges. So we're down to less than 1.1% already. And then many fewer still will be found guilty. Many fewer still will serve any jail time. So way, way, way less than 1%. So one of the things that tells us is that there's a lot of work that we have to do as a society. And in fact, institutions have their own separate responsibility under Title IX for adjudicating cases of sexual violence. And the perpetrators of campus rape, you may have heard that it's most often an acquaintance. It is, particularly on a college campus. So 60% are mere acquaintances, another 32% are romantic partners, so you get up to 92% are known to the survivor, versus about 8% that might be strangers. Now, how many men are perpetrators? That's a hotly debated topic that's been the subject of many different studies. Some of the earlier research found somewhere between 6 and 9% of college men had committed an act that met the legal definition of rape. But the most recent study actually found that statistic to be higher. Now, whether they use better research methods or the numbers increasing, kind of difficult to tell, but I do have confidence in the results of the study, and 11% of college men admitted committing a behavior that met the legal definition of rape on an anonymous survey. Now, I'm guessing in most cases they didn't believe that whatever they were admitting to met the legal definition of rape. However, that's how they answered these anonymous surveys. The other message from that particular study is that 98% of people who rape women are men. So if a woman experiences rape on a college campus, 98% of the time the perpetrator is male. If a man experiences rape on a college campus, 93% of the time the perpetrator is male. So not all men rape. In fact, by this study, 89% of men don't. I also tend to think that's not a very high bar for expectations of men to not rape. But 89% don't. So the message there is most people who rape are men, but most men don't rape. And so I think we need to be careful not to just bash all men and say they're all pigs and they're not really interested in the subject. A lot of men are really passionate about this subject. But we need to be, as men, those of us who are men, need to be passionate about this because it's other men who are doing this. And in a lot of cases, we're very well positioned to get through to them about their behavior being inappropriate. So that's a bit about perpetration. I hope you enjoy the readings, get more out of that, ask questions, make posts, and that we learn more about the frequency with which this occurs. Thank you.